Let me tell you something I have learned after nearly 4 decades of practicing medicine and walking beside patients through every chapter of life. The happiest people over 70 do something each day that many would call unthinkable, but it is not unthinkable because it is complicated or extraordinary. It is unthinkable because it is so simple that most people ignore it entirely. They connect. Every day. They do not let a day go by without reaching out to another human being. They wake up and they choose joy, they choose purpose, and they make that choice again and again, whether their joints ache or their memory slips a little, or their family has moved far away. These people are not extraordinary because they are lucky. They are extraordinary because they are intentional. They make small decisions every single day that lead to a rich, full, and beautiful life well into their later years. I want to paint this picture clearly. Imagine a woman named Eleanor. She is 78. She lives alone. Her husband passed 6 years ago, and her children live states away. But every morning, Eleanor writes one letter, a real, handwritten letter. She writes to friends, old neighbors, even grandchildren. She tells them what she saw outside her window. She shares a memory. Sometimes she includes a recipe. The act itself is quiet. But what it does for Eleanor is profound. It keeps her emotionally alive. She knows that every word she writes carries a piece of her soul. And she knows that someone else will hold that piece in their hands. That is connection. That is meaning. And let me tell you what science has to say about this. A study published in the Journal of Aging and Health followed a group of adults over 70 who practiced regular social connection, such as writing letters, calling friends, and participating in community groups. The results were undeniable. Those who maintained daily social ties showed a significantly lower rate of cognitive decline. They also experienced fewer symptoms of depression and had higher self-reported life satisfaction. This is not about having a large social circle. It is about showing up for one another, even in the smallest of ways. Now let us talk about movement. Yes, the body may be slower, the knees may creak, but I have watched countless older patients transform their lives simply by walking. Not running, not lifting weights, just walking, even for 15 minutes a day. There is something magical that happens when the body moves under the sky. The lungs expand, the blood flows, the brain lights up. One study from Harvard tracked older adults who walked daily and found that those who walked even as little as 15 minutes a day were 22% less likely to develop cardiovascular disease. More striking, those who walked outside also had better emotional regulation and reported feeling more peaceful. I remember one patient named Martin. He had survived cancer, lost a child, and struggled with anxiety. But every morning, rain or shine, Martin walked 3 laps around his neighborhood. He called it his medicine. He told me once that each step reminded him he was still here, still living, still part of this world. He greeted the birds, nodded to neighbors, listened to the rhythm of his own feet. This simple habit tethered him to life itself. That is the kind of unthinkable I am talking about. The kind that looks small on the outside but moves mountains inside the soul. Nutrition too is one of those daily choices that seems too basic to matter, but it does, more than we ever imagine. I am not here to give you a list of what not to eat. The happiest older adults I know do not obsess over avoiding things. They focus on adding life-giving foods, fresh fruits, green vegetables, water, a handful of nuts. They make food an act of love, not fear. I once met a 92-year-old man who told me he began every morning with a boiled egg, a slice of avocado, and a prayer of gratitude. He said it made him feel like a king. What the research shows is that diets rich in omega-3 fatty acids, leafy greens, and low in processed sugar can reduce the risk of Alzheimer's by as much as 35%. But more than that, food affects mood. People who eat whole foods report higher emotional resilience. They sleep better, they have more energy. And when you are over 70, energy is a precious currency. Now let me share a truth that people often ignore. Happy people over 70 do not avoid pain. They face it. They sit with grief. They remember the ones they lost. They cry, but they also laugh. They let themselves feel deeply. This emotional openness is one of the most powerful traits I have seen in older adults who live fulfilling lives. One study from the University of California found that emotional regulation, the ability to experience both joy and sadness without being overwhelmed, was the single strongest predictor of mental health in adults over 65. Let me tell you about Maria. She is 84. Her husband died decades ago. She never remarried, but she kept his photo on her nightstand and talked to him every night. She told me she still danced around the living room sometimes, pretending he was holding her. Some people would say that is delusional. I say it is wisdom. Maria honored her grief, but she did not let it rob her of the rest of her life. She allowed joy to coexist with sorrow. That takes strength. That takes courage. That is the secret no one tells you. The happiest people over 70 are not untouched by loss. They are seasoned by it, and they let it deepen them. Let me also say this clearly. Purpose is not a luxury, it is essential. The happiest older adults find a reason to get up each day, whether it is tending a garden, mentoring a young person, feeding the birds, writing stories, volunteering at a food pantry. They do not drift. They anchor themselves to something greater. A massive longitudinal study known as the Health and Retirement Study found that older adults who had a sense of purpose were twice as likely to remain active and independent well into their 80s and beyond. Twice as likely. Purpose is not just spiritual, it is biological. It affects brain chemistry, it affects the immune system. It even affects how genes are expressed. People with a strong sense of purpose live longer. Period. And yes, the happiest among them also rest. They are not constantly busy. They rest without guilt. They nap when needed. They sit in silence. They breathe slowly. They do not measure their value by productivity. They measure it by presence. They watch the light change in the afternoon. They notice the warmth of a cup in their hands. They are not in a hurry, and in that stillness, they find beauty. Rest is not laziness, it is restoration. And studies confirm this. Adequate rest is linked with lower inflammation, better memory retention, and reduced risk of stroke. One study published in the journal Sleep found that older adults who consistently got restful sleep had brains that looked nearly 7 years younger in imaging scans than those with poor sleep patterns. Another powerful truth I have learned is this: happy people over 70 forgive. They let things go. They stop carrying grudges. They stop waiting for apologies. They do not waste their final decades looking back with bitterness. They choose peace. There is a freedom in this kind of letting go that can change a person's entire posture toward life. The Mayo Clinic has published research showing that forgiveness reduces anxiety, lowers blood pressure, and strengthens the immune system. And it is never too late. I once watched a man in his 80s reconcile with his brother after 40 years of silence. They wept in my office. That moment brought them both healing that medicine could never provide. Let me speak now about laughter. Real, full-bodied laughter. The kind that shakes your shoulders, that surprises you, that lightens your chest. Laughter, my friends, is a daily vitamin for the soul. The happiest older adults find something to laugh about each day. They watch a funny movie. They tell old stories. They laugh at themselves. Laughter releases endorphins. It lowers stress hormones. It even boosts the function of blood vessels. One study from Loma Linda University showed that laughter improved memory recall and reduced cortisol levels in older adults. I have had patients who were physically frail but emotionally rich because they laughed every single day. That joy is infectious, and it heals. And do not underestimate the power of learning. Yes, learning. The happiest elders I know never stop being curious. They read. They listen to podcasts. They take up new hobbies. They ask questions. The brain, even at 70 or 80 or 90, can still grow. Neuroplasticity is not just a theory, it is a fact. The brain continues to form new connections throughout life. One landmark study in the journal Nature showed that older adults who engaged in challenging mental activities maintained higher cognitive function and had a lower risk of dementia. So whether it is learning to paint, studying history, or playing an instrument, that spark of curiosity feeds the mind and the spirit. Finally, I will tell you this. The happiest people over 70 are deeply grateful. They do not compare themselves to others. They do not focus on what they have lost. They focus on what remains. Gratitude changes everything. It shifts the entire lens of life. It is not just a mood booster, it is a life strategy. A study from the University of California, Davis, found that individuals who practiced daily gratitude had better immune function, lower blood pressure, and increased feelings of well-being. I knew one 90-year-old woman who kept a gratitude journal by her bedside. Every night she wrote down 3 things she was thankful for. Some days it was just a warm pair of socks or a visit from a robin, but it grounded her. It reminded her that life, even in its simplest form, was a gift. So yes, it may sound unthinkable, but the happiest people over 70 choose these small habits every single day. They connect, they move, they eat with intention, they feel, they rest, they forgive, they laugh, they learn, and they give thanks. These are not just routines, they are lifelines. They are the quiet, invisible threads that hold a life together. I have seen it again and again. The most fulfilled older adults are not chasing happiness. They are creating it moment by moment with the choices they make each day. And that, my friend, is a kind of wisdom worth sharing. How can learning new skills boost brain health after 70? Let me share something truly important with you. Many people believe that once we pass 70, our brains start a slow, inevitable decline, and that there is little we can do to change that path. I want to challenge that idea with evidence, experience, and a deep understanding of how the human brain works. Learning new skills after 70 is not only possible, it is one of the most powerful ways to boost brain health and protect ourselves from cognitive decline. When we engage in new activities that challenge us mentally, we are not just passing time. We are actively rewiring our brains, keeping the connections alive and vibrant. This is not just theory, this is proven science. The brain is not a static organ, it is flexible and adaptable throughout life. This ability is called neuroplasticity. Even in older age, the brain continues to form new neural connections. Learning new skills activates this process. It stimulates different parts of the brain that may have been quiet for years. Imagine the brain as a muscle. If you never use it, it weakens. But if you exercise it by learning, it grows stronger. For example, learning to play a musical instrument requires coordination, memory, and concentration. This kind of complex activity lights up multiple regions of the brain simultaneously. A study from the University of California found that older adults who learned to play the piano showed increased brain volume in areas responsible for motor skills and memory after just 6 months. I have seen this transformation in my own patients. One woman in her 70s began taking a pottery class. She told me she had never considered herself artistic, but as she learned to shape clay and work the wheel, she noticed improvements not only in her creativity, but also in her memory and mood. Her family said she was more engaged and joyful. That is no coincidence. Activities that require hands-on learning and problem-solving improve brain function by encouraging new pathways to form. This is how the brain fights back against age-related changes. But it is not only artistic skills. Learning a new language, for example, is another fantastic way to keep the brain sharp. When you learn a new language, you exercise the parts of the brain involved in memory, attention, and problem-solving. A study published in the journal Neuropsychologia showed that bilingual older adults had better executive function and delayed the onset of dementia symptoms by several years compared to monolingual peers. The constant practice of switching between languages demands mental flexibility and strengthens cognitive reserve. This reserve is what allows the brain to cope with damage without showing symptoms. It is a kind of mental insurance policy. It is important to remember that learning does not have to be intimidating. It is not about becoming an expert overnight. It is about the process of discovery, trying something new, making mistakes, and gradually improving. The joy comes from the journey, not perfection. This attitude reduces stress and promotes a positive mindset, which is equally beneficial for brain health. Chronic stress is known to shrink the hippocampus, the brain area crucial for memory. By learning in a relaxed and joyful way, we protect that precious part of our brain. Studies support this approach. The ACTIVE study, a large clinical trial, showed that older adults who engaged in mental training exercises like reasoning, memory, or speed of processing experienced significant improvements in cognitive function that lasted for years. This means that targeted mental activities can have lasting benefits. Learning new skills can be seen as a form of mental training that strengthens the brain's capacity to process information, remember details, and solve problems. There is also the social aspect of learning that cannot be overlooked. When older adults join classes or groups to learn new skills, they gain social interaction. This social engagement itself is linked to better brain health and longer life. Humans are social beings, and isolation can accelerate cognitive decline. Sharing the learning experience, laughing at mistakes, encouraging one another, all of these moments fuel not just the brain but the heart. One study from Rush University showed that seniors with strong social networks had a 40% slower rate of memory decline. So learning new skills often brings connection, which in turn nourishes the brain. I want to emphasize that it is never too late to begin. Whether you are 70, 80 or beyond, starting a new hobby, a new language, or any new skill can be a gift to yourself. The brain will respond positively. The challenge is to take that first step. I remember a man named Robert who took up digital photography at the age of 75. He had never touched a camera before, but he found joy in framing pictures, adjusting settings, and learning editing software. Over time, he noticed he could focus better and that his memory for names and places improved. Photography gave him a new lens on life, literally and figuratively. There is also evidence that learning new skills can help delay or reduce the risk of neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. A study from the Mayo Clinic found that intellectually stimulating activities were associated with a lower risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. The brain's reserve created by lifelong learning helps compensate for the damage caused by these diseases, often delaying symptoms for years. This is a powerful reason to keep feeding your brain new challenges. Another benefit of learning new skills is that it keeps the mind engaged in a purposeful way. Purpose is a key factor in healthy aging. When we dedicate time to mastering something new, we cultivate a sense of accomplishment and meaning. This positive psychological state supports brain health by reducing depression and anxiety, which are risk factors for cognitive decline. In fact, a study published in the Journal of Gerontology found that seniors who engaged in purposeful activities had better memory and slower cognitive decline. It is important to choose skills that excite you personally. The best learning is rooted in passion and curiosity. Whether it is gardening, cooking a new cuisine, knitting, writing, or even using new technology, what matters most is that the activity stretches your brain in new ways. Avoid routines that are too easy or familiar. The brain thrives on novelty and challenge. To help you get started, consider setting small, achievable goals. Celebrate progress, not perfection. Join community centers, local classes, or even online courses designed for older adults. Many libraries offer free workshops. The key is consistency. Just like physical exercise, brain training requires regular practice to be effective. Even 15 minutes a day of focused learning can make a difference over time. Remember this well. Learning new skills after 70 is not about fighting age. It is about embracing the capacity to grow, change, and adapt at any stage of life. It is about honoring the brain's remarkable resilience and giving it the nourishment it needs to stay healthy. The brain, like the body, thrives on challenge and connection. When you choose to learn, you choose to live fully. This choice will echo in every part of your life. You will find yourself more alert, more engaged, more joyful, more alive. So take heart and take that step today. Pick up a new book, enroll in a class, try your hand at something unfamiliar. Your brain will thank you. Your life will thank you. And the years ahead will be richer, brighter, and filled with new possibilities because you dared to keep learning.